My name is Elizabeth Ann Bailey Seton. I was born in 1774 and I died of tuberculosis in 1821 when I was 46 years old. In 1975, the Catholic Church declared me to be a saint. Now, why would the Catholic Church feel that I was special enough to be recognized as a saint? Was it because after I died, when people prayed to me, miracles happened? Well, that's partly the reason. But the major reason I was made a saint was the fact that I had lived a devout religious life. And that means my life was completely devoted to God and to serving people as Jesus did. But you know, I wasn't always a devoutly religious person. So how did I get to be such a devout person? Well, that's the interesting thing that I'd like to talk to you about. But first, let's go back to 1774. 1774 was the year I was born. Now, 1774 is 2 years before the 13 English colonies signed the Declaration of Independence. In other words, I was a citizen of England. Now, in those 13 colonies, many of those colonists were patriots. That is, they wanted to secede so badly from England that they were willing to go to war and lose their lives. Now, I don't remember much about that war, except that my family, the Baileys, they were loyalists. That is, they wanted England to win. And the man I later married, William Seton Jr., his family, they were loyalists too. But in the time between 1775 and 1783, which spans the Revolutionary War, the Patriots battled England. And after many deaths, the Patriots won over the Loyalists. And now I was no longer an English citizen. I was a citizen of the United States. So I grew up in a brand new country. Now at that time, slavery was legal, and both the Bailey and Seton families owned slaves. For example, when my grandfather died, he willed to my sister and me his slave. At the time, my father, Richard Bailey, was a doctor. He was the chief health officer of the city of New York, and a big part of his job was to stamp out disease in Manhattan. Now, most of Manhattan was farmland, but because the tip of Manhattan was a major shipping area for merchandise, slaves, and immigrants, this dense, polluted area of Manhattan, especially during summertime, was a hot spot for diseases like yellow fever and typhus. But because my family was wealthy, we had a country home, so I could get out of the city and escape these diseases. Now let's talk about religion. My father and my mother were both Anglicans. In fact, my maternal grandfather was an Anglican minister at St. Andrew's in Staten Island. Now, Anglicans are Christians. That is, they believe that Jesus is God. And Anglicanism was one form of Christianity in America. But let me tell you quickly how Anglicanism came to be. In the 1500s, the Catholic Church was involved in practices like selling indulgences. That is, if you pay the church money, the Pope could forgive your sins in the next life. Now, a German priest, Martin Luther, felt that the Catholic Church was corrupt in things like selling these indulgences, so the Pope excommunicated him. Other countries in Europe agreed with Martin Luther and protested too. And they also split off from the Catholic Church. So the churches that had protested were called Protestant churches. When England split off from Catholicism and formed their new church, called the Anglican Church, since England owned the 13 colonies, the predominant religion was Anglicanism. So in 1774, I was baptized in Anglican. But after the American Revolution ended in 1783, since the United States was separated from the Church of England, we were now a new religion called Episcopalians. Same religion, but different name. Another form of Christianity in the United States was Catholicism. Right before the Revolution, of the 2.5 million people in the 13 colonies, only 35,000 were Catholics. And Catholicism was not tolerated in many of the colonies. Catholics suffered higher taxation, and some even lost their legal rights just for being Catholic. And there were always fights between Protestants and Catholics. While the fighting seemed to be from religious differences, or from the Protestants not wanting Americans to switch religions and start tithing to a different church, others say the real reason for the hostility was that Protestants did not want to compete with Catholics for land, jobs, and political control. One group that wanted to see Catholicism expand in the colonies was the Catholic merchants, because when merchants shared the same religion, they have increased trade with one another. Now, before the Revolution, there was one colony where Catholicism had already been tolerated for many years, and that colony was Maryland. And so this is where many of the Catholics lived. Interestingly, the richest man in the colonies lived in Maryland. His name was Charles Carroll, and he was a Catholic. The Carrolls had huge plantations and owned many slaves. And because of his wealth, he had great political influence. In fact, Charles Carroll was a congressman, and he was one of the founding fathers and signers of the Declaration of Independence. Also, Charles had a wealthy and influential cousin who became a Catholic priest. The priest's name was John Carroll. With such wealth and influence of the Carrolls, after the Revolution, the Pope had made John Carroll the first American-born bishop in the United States. At the time, the whole United States was considered one diocese, and the seat of the diocese was in Maryland. So Bishop Carroll's job was to expand Catholicism in the United States, and in order to do that, he needed to do 5 things. He needed to increase the number of priests serving the United States, so he needed to build seminaries. He also needed to build Catholic schools in order to teach young boys not only the 3 R's, but also to inculcate the Catholic religion. But in order to operate Catholic schools for girls, he needed sisters to run the schools. So Carroll needed to establish new communities of sisters.